Hello, mate. It's Thrive Nation. We're all talking about brain health today, and it's really a privilege to have Dr. Brandon Crawford back on the show for the second time. He's an innovator, he's a healer, brain healer. He is an entrepreneur, he's a chiropractor, he's a functional neurologist, and he's doing incredible work worldwide. Just opened another one of his sites in Dubai, which we'll talk about. So, a warm welcome back to you, Brandon.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited for this conversation.
Cool. Tell us about the technology because that's why I wanted you on back. You've developed this 528 eye laser, and I think it's important because obviously you spent many, many years treating brain health and just central nervous systems and peripheral nervous systems and just dysfunctional nervous systems. And so you've obviously developed firstly the hardware and the software.
Yes. So I think that we all understand, everyone that's listening understands that we have a very intimate connection with light, right? I
Yeah.
mean, we can derail our health by surrounding ourselves with a poor light environment, or we can really leverage and optimize our health if we use light correctly. And so, being a clinician, I've been able to work with people from around the world, and many of those cases are severe complex neurological disorders. And I've used lasers of all different types, and there's some really good products out there. But what I noticed is that as science and as technology continued to advance, the laser industry was not really following, specifically in regard to therapy lasers. And so, I talked with different CEOs, I talked with different companies, and they just weren't willing to innovate. And I finally said, you know what? If they're not going to do it, I'm going to do it. And so what we put together is quite remarkable. This is the only laser on the planet that is actually a class 4 power, so it's a very powerful laser, but it's a class 3R safety rating. So that was actually not easy to develop. So we actually had to develop an optical system. So within the modules, we actually have a very complex optical system that then takes that very powerful laser beam, does not lose the benefit of having the density of those photons, but actually creates a type of laser beam that's very safe. So there's that strategy, but then we also created a very highly modulated type of laser beam. And what I mean by that is this. So we have to understand that a laser beam is kind of like a voice, right? And so if I'm trying to calm a baby down and help that baby fall asleep, right? I'm not going to yell at that baby like, "All right, baby, it's time to go to sleep." You know what I mean? Like I can say those words, but those words don't really mean anything if I'm yelling at them with that intonation and all that kind of stuff, right? I have to modulate my voice to bring it down. I'm going to talk slower, right? That creates a different neurophysiology, right? Even though I'm saying the same words,
Exactly.
how I say them
Yeah,
very
because it's a
much
different
matters.
frequency, and your voice is a frequency, which is sound, and light is a frequency. And then you're
That's
using
right.
these frequencies on the central nervous system. For those that haven't listened to part one, please go back and we'll just put a link in the show notes because we're talking about people with ADD, ADHD, autism. If you've got brain fog, if you're struggling with complex tasks, we've worked with Dr. Dale Bredesen and looking at cognoscopies. For those execs that are out there in all our corporate work, you've done your cognoscopy and your reasoning's a problem, your executive function a problem, and your memory's a problem, then the use of laser and the use of light is going to be crucially important for those photons to speak to each other and communicate with each other. That's where the brain entrainment and the connection. So maybe just, yeah, you're talking about a baby and frequency, but also put it in light of the archetype of someone who's an executive, who's under distress, who's got anxiety, who's got real problems with burnout and tiredness, because it'll be also good examples there. Or someone who's had a concussion or someone who's had a brain injury, just so that people can relate to it.
Sure. So we can definitely apply this technology and actually that's primarily why I designed this is because I wanted to get better results. So for example, like I have a setting in here called laser focus. So it's literally designed to get your mind
Yeah.
laser focused, right? So I'll use this before I go into a new patient exam or before I go to into a meeting or something like this. And it's designed so that if I sweep it over my forehead, through my temples, etc., I'm going to entrain a certain brain wave so that my brain is functioning sharper, it's more effective. Because we know, right, if we want to be sharp, effective, we need to be more in that low beta range. And then I even have, the high beta range in there if someone feels better in that regard. I have a program called Higher Consciousness. These are very, very high frequencies. The
What type of
feedback on that.
frequencies there, Brandon? So we can talk, because the audience has got quite a understanding. I know that you spoke of, like, the red and the infrared of 808, and I think had I down 975 nanometers, which is very, very important in terms of certain applications. But while you're going through it, just because I know the hardware out there that I've done the research is not to the degree that you've put time and effort. We just know that they might claim it, but it sounds like it's just because you spent so much time, you've got the different modular effects that can treat different conditions. And I think that's crucially important.
Well, something that no one has actually done is, yes, we have, okay, so we have the wavelengths, right? So we have a 638 nanometer red, we have 808 nanometer infrared, 975 nanometer infrared, and then we're also iterating, and we currently have our green and violet module going through FDA clearance right now. So it's not available on the market. The green and violet are not available now, but we've been doing testing with it. I've been using it in my office, trialing it. It's phenomenal. So we have the wavelength aspect. And then we have the pulsing frequency aspect, but what no one's doing is I've also created a rhythmically altering duty cycle coupled with the pulsing frequencies. And so that's where I can literally modulate the intensity of that beam, coupled with the pulsing frequency, which is the information, coupled with the wavelength, which is depth of penetration, but also how much energy is being delivered per photon. So it's this unique combination of all of these different parameters. And then that's not even talking about the polarization effect, which we're polarizing the light in a way that, honestly, our optical engineers told us we would not be able to achieve. And they said, well, let's, move forward anyway. And we were able to achieve what we're trying to do. So there's multiple different levers going on here. And that's what I mean when I say this is a highly modulated laser beam, and we have over 100 different presets right now, and I'm always making more. I think we're launching with 20 different programs, and we're always making more. But each one of these different settings, each one of these different things, is literally modulated in a different way, right? And that's a big key. You can have a laser product or a photobiomodulation device, and I mean, each setting is a little different. Maybe they pulse it in a different way, but there's not much difference between those settings, just to be honest, right? That's a big difference here, is that literally every setting is significantly different, and you will see different results with them.
Sure. Sounds incredible. Now, tell me about this hardware. Is it for the public? Is it only practitioners? Would you have to be a registered practitioner to be able to use it? Are you going to be doing training courses? Where does it lie?
So currently it is a medical device. So we first wanted to be able to service the medical providers, the therapists, those types of people. However, because it is a class 3R device, it is safe enough to be used in the home. And so we have all different types of biohackers or health enthusiasts or whatever, right? That are purchasing the device for their personal use at home. But we also have clinicians, whether it's PTs, chiros, OTs, medical doctors, neurooptometrists, that are purchasing devices to use in their practice on their patients. And then it's a beautiful scenario, because what will happen is they're working with their patients, they're seeing great results, and then the patient says, can I continue this at home? And then they can actually acquire a device to continue at home. So that's the initial launch. Now, what we will file with is OTC clearance, where we get over-the-counter clearance, and then we can make the technology even more ubiquitous. And then we have other iterations where we're coming out that's more dedicated to home user, and then we'll have other iterations more dedicated to the clinician. Right now, this is a happy middle ground.
Okay, brilliant. And now tell me, like, if someone's doing, they come in and you sort of said, oh, for more focus, you just put it around here. Are there ways to assess this? Like, if someone wants to downregulate, then you're going to do a certain, frequency, number one. Then secondly, you're going to modulate it in a certain way. Then I see you wearing a Whoop. I wear a Whoop. We do a lot of wearables. Is HRV going to change? If you do a stress sort of score, are you going to see it? I mean, where do you apply it? I mean, someone's listening saying, geez, I just need to get out of this high beta. I want to go low beta, or I even want to go into alpha. How is that going to be assessed, number one? And two, is there training with regards to that?
So there's currently not like a training course per se, right? That is something that I'm looking to develop. We're one thing at a time, right? But what I did do is I put a lot of my knowledge into the app. So we actually
Okay.
have a companion app, an application that can go on your phone, on your tablet, or whatever. And that's where more guidance is going to be housed. I've had to work with an FDA consultant as far as exactly what I can deliver, right, is in a legal way. So I'm giving as much information as I possibly can through the app for how to use each setting, how to, in the programs, what I mean by programs is, if someone has, let's just say, a headache, right, and they don't know how to use a laser for the headache, they go to the headache program, and it literally will say, start, say put laser here, it'll go and it'll beep and it'll go, okay, now put the laser here, right? It'll actually walk you through how to use the laser for that scenario.
Mm.
As far as the training goes, like I said, I'm developing courses, but for now, we had to quickly deliver that information because not everyone wants to, sit down for,
No, of
several
course.
hours to go through the course. And then as far as HRV goes, or other biometrics. The cool thing about HRV is it's related to so many different parameters. And the thing about photobiomodulation is it really just makes your cells more efficient at whatever they need to do. And so as you track your HRV, and if you have a consistent use of a photo, yes, hours, absolutely. But if you consistently use a high quality photobiomodulation device, you should begin to see changes in the HRV at some point in time. Now, it may be by a few points, it may be by 5 or 10 points, something like this. But I'm currently tracking mine. Actually, I was just looking at this the other day. I've had about a 10-point bump over the past month, which is great. Because I've been consistently lasering my thyroid, my carotids, transcranially, in my abdominal aorta. So I've been doing that at least 4 to 5 times a week. I have not changed anything else in my routine.
Wow.
Yet my Whoop has now showed that I've had about a 10-point bump in my HRV. Do I want to do a study on this? I do. Our initial studies are really looking more towards the regenerative medicine side. So I'm talking with a researcher pretty close to me, actually, and we're actually investigating how this laser actually impacts various stem cells and other cell types and growth factors and things like that. So I want to get really granular as far as surface receptor protein activation and other parameters within that. But that's my initial push in the research. Will we do more? Absolutely. We're going to have a whole R&D, side to our company, but this is where I want to go initially.
Yeah, I mean, you're doing so many things. You're opening sites, you're developing hardware, you're treating patients, your socials. Talking about socials, we'll put a link on the Instagram, guys. You got to go and look. Dr. Brandon Crawford spoke about the carotids. You'll see him using the laser on many, many patients there and testimonials. It's incredible. And we'll talk about the story of Cole. But how many, you said 5 to 6 weeks, and and how long does that take you, Brandon? I mean, you're putting it on the thyroid. I mean, obviously you can speak why you're doing that, then the carotids, the aorta, I would have, and transcranial, then I would have thought, okay, obviously the vagus nerve, maybe that's going to catch it in the front, or maybe the cervical
Yes.
spine. Take us through how long
Yes.
that takes you, and then just your thinking, your clinical reasoning behind that.
No problem. So I have 3 different access points for blood illumination in the brain. 2 main ones, and then the third one that we use sometimes. So the carotid arteries are great access. And let me just describe first what I mean by blood illumination. So when you use high quality coherent light, right? So this is different than LED. Can you still get blood illumination in what I call biological down conversion from LED? Yes, you can. It's just not as precise. It's not as powerful. But when I use this right over my carotid with red or infrared light, and honestly with green and violet works phenomenally, and I can discuss why. But what's happening is you're actually flooding the blood with these photons. It's this delivery of energy, and then that's going up into the brain. The carotid artery is going into the different hemispheres of the brain, right? So you get this widespread effect on improved blood flow, oxygenation, mitochondrial function, growth factors, all of these types of things. And then my next access point is the vertebral artery. And where I access that is behind the ear, right? So really just right off the TVP of the C1 vertebrae, right? This is also called a retrosig access point in neurosurgery, but I'll use a laser there to impact the vertebral artery, which then goes straight up the brainstem, right? So now I'm improving perfusion and all those different metrics in the brainstem. Sometimes I'll actually go in, find the temporal artery, and be a little more direct over the temporal artery there as well. Yes, you can go with straight transcranial through the skull, absolutely. So any kind of brain region that we're trying to impact, whether it's prefrontal cortex, frontal lobe, temporal, parietal, occipital, whatever we want to do there. Yes, absolutely. But as a step one for general brain health, I go with blood illumination. You can have a widespread effect. You can influence, all the different brain regions very effectively. We've seen that time and time again clinically. So I'm going to hit the carotids 5 minutes each. I'm going to hit the vertebrals 5 minutes each. I will sometimes get the midline cerebellum because I believe cerebellar function is so vital to so many different things. I'm then going to laser over the abdominal aorta. Okay, so that's just about an inch or so above the belly button. I'm going to do that for multiple reasons. Same thing, we're going to generate that biological down conversion, which is where the red blood cells and other cellular constituents are going into the distal areas of blood flow. And as they do that, they're emitting lower frequency, lower energy photons, right? So if you put a higher energy photon into them as they continue to go downstream, they're emitting photons as they go, right? So it's like they're depleting that photonic energy as they go down. That's what I mean by photonic or by biological down conversion. So by illuminating the abdominal aorta, I'm now having an influence on all the major organs and the microbiome. So this is a general health kind of strategy, right? I want my microbiome to be nice and healthy. This is a great use case for the 808 nanometers. There's a good study that shows it increases good bacteria, reduces bad bacteria. And so I'll use 808 over the abdominal aorta to influence the gut and the organs. And then me personally, I've got primary hypothyroid and Hashimoto's. There's multiple studies showing photobiomodulation improves thyroid function. I've seen it time and time again in my labs. I'll be my own experiment where I'll laser my thyroid consistently, right? And this is, at least
what frequency or at what module?
So I have certain programs for this. I'm actually still refining my actual thyroid setting. So I will say that much. I'm still refining it. I have one that I've developed. Sometimes I use my inflammation setting. Sometimes I actually have a setting that is called love. I'm a big believer in quantum biology, quantum physics, right? And I believe that the intention that is set forth by the person holding the laser influences the laser beam. And so you're essentially acting as a quantum computer for that laser beam. And so if I have a setting that's called love, which does have frequencies that correlate with love, right? And it's not just 528. I have multiple frequencies in that setting. Then that sets the intention for use, right? Now, I have actually seen that setting be very, very effective in the regenerative medicine procedures that we do. And that makes sense because I believe love is the most generative frequency that we have, right? So if we're trying to create from new, if we're trying to restore, if we're trying to revive, right? I'll use that love setting quite often. And so I use that over my thyroid
Mm.
because I have a pretty heavy Hashimoto's attack going on when my stress levels go up. But duration of use, usually about 5 minutes over the thyroid. And like I said, I'm rather consistent on that, at least 5 days a week. Sometimes I'll take the weekends off. But if I do that, my TSH normalizes, my
Mm.
Hashimoto's markers come way down.
Wow.
I mean, it's very apparent. And then I'll stop doing that for a month and I'll retest. And every time those markers start to go awry again. So, I mean, I'm a great use case for how
Mm.
powerful photobiomodulation can be for those. Of course, you should always work on all the other things as well.
Of course.
Diet, exercise, lifestyle, like those are absolutely key with managing any disease process or lifestyle, whatever's going on there. So always a proponent of that.
But it's amazing because, we've got to use other frequencies. And this light, I think, is an area that you've now tapped into in terms of making sure we can get very specific on frequency, on dose, on how you modulate it. And for me, there's a big reason why God put the thyroid just underneath here. Because if you just think from ancient times, biblical times, that's where a lot of light would come. So obviously, your thyroid must be an organ that is very, very sensitive to light. So are your
Correct.
eyes. Your eyes, we know, are the gateway, the extension of your brain, very sensitive to light, what light you allow in. So I think it makes a lot more sense that this is almost the gap. I'm not saying, I mean, I've been doing functional medicine for 18 years and it's as important, but I do think with modern day living, we've compromised the frequencies of light that we need as a human species.
Correct. And yeah, I don't want to go conspiracy theorist here, but I do believe that part of that is by design, unfortunately, to create a wave of ill health. I think that I think that the powers that be know what they're doing when they hijack our dopamine systems and get us
Yeah.
addicted to screens and all
Mm.
of these different things. And you might find it interesting some of the pulsing strategies that we're developing as well, because I do have a strong faith. I know you have a strong faith, and we're actually using like Bible verses, right?
Sure.
So John 3:16, right? So I may implement a pulsing strategy of 3:16 with the intention of that John 3:16 Bible verse, right? To carry, again, it's all about that quantum energy information delivery, right? So those are even some strategies that I've begun to incorporate. And honestly, I've been quite impressed.
Brilliant. And we also use a product called Brain Tap. I had Dr. Patrick Porter again on the
Hmm.
show. I think it's an incredible, there you got sound, there's a frequency, and now you got light that you've got. He's incorporated, just a headset around the ears and around the eyes in terms of what he's doing. Have you looked at the laser from, I've been doing acupuncture 26 years now, incorporating the different frequencies over the ears, auricular acupuncture, or even saying,
Yes.
major areas like, the liver channel. I've just seen, in 26 years, I've just never seen people's livers to the degree that they're at, and, injecting things like ozone that I inject in, or Chinese medicine into those liver points has been incredible. And using a traditional infrared lamp or just using a traditional light has been helpful. But obviously, you've got very specific in terms of, so you could take these acupuncture points and use the laser in certain areas to augment your treatments.
Absolutely. Okay. So many things to kind of expand on there. Let me start with this. In this initial launch, my initial set of frequencies, I have an acupoint harmony setting, and this is like a general use setting for whatever acupuncture point you need. Now, Dr. Jerry Levine, who I work very close with, she's in my office, and she's also based out of Atlanta. She's a psychologist. She's an integrative psychologist. She does functional neurology work as well. She's also has her acupuncture license. I have my acupuncture license as well. She's actually developing a full set of protocols and settings for all the different acupuncture points, all the different acupuncture meridians. And that's what I love about our system and our app, is that as we develop that type of content, we will be able to release it, and you'll have access to a whole new host of settings and protocols and things like that. So from an acupuncture perspective, we're about to have a very comprehensive, robust protocol set in different settings and whatnot for all the different acupuncture points with their very specific frequencies associated with them. Very excited about that. I will also say that I'm about to release the organs. So I've been working on all the different organ settings, and in the organ settings, I do also incorporate the frequencies for that particular acupuncture meridian. Now, there's more than just that, but I do incorporate that into that organ setting as well. So that's exciting. Now, from a methodology standpoint, if we're going to work on the liver, okay, we need to understand the concepts of co-activation. So yes, can I just take a photobiomodulation device, put it over my liver? I can, absolutely. But we need to understand that networks and cells that are more metabolically active are going to be more influenced by the photobiomodulation. So if I want to really get specific and targeted, I want to activate the organ or the tissue that I want to influence so that I can be even more specific. So for the liver, I may put a warm castor oil compress over the liver for 20 minutes and do some symboconscious stimulus for vagal activation. And then laser the liver, because I just activated that tissue more and it's going to have a greater influence. So those are types of strategies that we're developing in all the different programs as well. And again, that's very meticulous. The programs are what takes me the longest because we have to do a video, we have to do a write-up, we have to put it in stepwise progression. But that's the type of content that we're putting into the software.
Sure. Amazing. You guys are doing incredible work. Well done. And I know only yourself and your staff and your family must know the amount of countless hours you put behind this, but I really do believe that you're sowing incredible seeds that are going to benefit many. Tell us about using the laser intranasally. There's a lot of devices now in terms of using infrared there, or anything else from an application perspective, because I do think a lot of people are going to want to do it at home. If I just think, now I've got someone taking the device and putting it over the frontal part. Can they do damage? I mean, if they stick it up their nose too long or they stare at it too long, I mean, are there a lot of risks with this type of device?
So the great thing about photobiomodulation in general is that it carries a very strong upside with a very minimal downside. I guess I'll speak to that first, right? That's the concept of hormesis, also called the biphasic dose response curve, also called the Arndt-Schultz law. And everyone understands this, whether or not they think they understand it. It's basically that too small of a dose doesn't do anything. You have just the right amount, and then you have too much can be deleterious. This is true of everything. This is true of exercise, water, supplementation, medication, right? This applies to everything, including photobiomodulation. However, we have to understand that the research that's been done, especially the early research, was mainly in vitro studies. And so if you take a group of cells, you isolate them outside of the body in a petri dish and you put laser on them or photobiomodulation, you're going to have an observed effect, but you cannot translate that effect directly into a live human body, right? Because you have active dynamic systems, an immune response, cytokine responses, like you have an active live response in the body that's not present in the petri dish. So we cannot directly correlate that. We also then need to understand that if someone has a disease process going on, that too is going to change the energy demands of their cells, right? Just like when we get sick, we need more vitamin D, we need more B vitamins, we need more nutrients, more nutrition when we become ill, right? So our hormetic curve changed based on our health status. This is true in photobiomodulation, yet there's no studies that are actually doing this, right? This is another area. I actually spoke to some researchers out of Brazil that want to do this research for me because this has not been done. And where this is really important to understand is when you have companies that will, for marketing purposes, tell you that if you use over X power, you're going to cause damage and destruction and destroy your brain and all this kind of stuff. And then they cherry pick the research, right, and say, this is why we're right and they're wrong. Okay, look, if that were true, I wouldn't have a patient base because I'm exceeding those doses that they quote every single day. And guess what? My patients are getting better. No one's getting injured. So I don't really understand the argument. Well, I understand the argument. It's more of a marketing perspective.
Yeah.
But we have to understand that the dose is dependent upon the individual that's in front of you. And you can measure things. You can measure something like a pulse ox. You can look at heart rate and oxygen saturation. If you are starting to exceed that hermetic curve, it'll drive a stress response. You drive a stress response, your heart rate starts to go up, your oxygen starts to go down. So we did that mainly in our early days. We still do that on our more complex cases. Now, what we've been able to do, I've been doing this for 15 years. I have enough clinical data to know what dosages are safe, and I have those built into the recommended suggested use guidelines and whatnot within the laser, right? So I know that's kind of a long answer to answer, that way, but I can't just say, give you a short answer when it comes to,
No, of course.
the hermetic curve. Now, you mentioned intranasal. I love intranasal. I think it's good. We're targeting the Clavox plexus, which is a very densely populated group of blood vessels that then go up into the prefrontal cortex. This is more of a blood illumination strategy, and I used to do a lot of intranasal laser use. I don't do as much anymore. Here's why. I've actually seen a better effect if I laser the sinuses, right? So I'm still having an impact on Clavox, but I've actually seen a better effect there. And then if I need to influence the midbrain, which oftentimes people will laser intranasal to influence the midbrain, I've actually found more effectiveness going through the temple. That's just my clinical observation. You can also go intraoral, so you can actually laser. I actually really like that approach because you get the lower brain stem. You can angle a little steeper and start to get the midbrain as well. But I really like intraoral laser use as well. So while we still do some intranasal, I'm doing less and less of it. I tend to go through the temple. I also like lasering over the sinuses specifically because so many people have mold issues. So many people have dysbiosis in the sinus cavity. So we're doing a lot of laser use over the sinuses as well.
So what does it do for dysbiosis in terms of the sinus and your nasal microbiome? Does it change things significantly?
Yeah, it depends on the wavelength, right? So if we're using red or infrared, you're going to have more of an impact on the inflammatory status, which then can allow for better population of the microbiome. Now, if I'm using violet, I love violet use over the sinuses, over the microbiome, because that can actually have an antimicrobial effect. There's great studies looking at using violet even for COVID, for MRSA, for different, really stubborn infections. Violet can be very, very beneficial to actually eliminate infections. What I'm not saying is use violet to treat infections, all the legal, jargon that goes along with that. But what I can say is that there are good studies that show the antimicrobial effect of violet. I'm starting to see a beneficial effect in using green in these scenarios as well. There's multiple reasons. There's definitely an impact on hemoglobin, and it also impacts DNA methylation. So there's multiple things going on with green. There's still a lot of unknowns about green, but clinically we're seeing a huge impact there. But yeah, you definitely see a great change in the microbiome, whether it be sinus, whether it be the gut, when you use red, infrared, or violet directly over these areas. My preferred way to do it, if you have like a mold infection or some kind of something like that going on, I'll use violet and then I'll use infrared and then I'll use red. So you just kind of layer in the different wavelengths there.
Okay, maybe you can just speak in, people might be asking, we've spoken a lot about the benefits of sunlight, God-given sunlight, and just the red light that's in there, 40 to 50%. What type of, energy are you getting? What type of light? How important is that?
In regards to sunlight?
Yeah, just sunlight. I mean, I think it's
Oh my gosh.
42% red,
Yeah. Yeah,
we're
yeah, yeah.
talking about lasers now, but then lasers a certain
Yes.
frequency. Someone's listening saying, "Oh, I've got a laser or got it." But, in the interim, what is sunlight in that red light going to do?
Absolutely. Okay, so here's what everyone needs to understand, right? I think I've developed the best laser in the world, hands down. I'm pretty biased, okay? But here's the thing.
You got to
It's
believe
not
that.
better. Exactly. It's not better than the sun, okay? There is no product on the market that is going to compete with what you can get from the sun, okay? Just not going to happen. The most pure red light you will ever experience is at sunrise, right? When that sun is coming up over the horizon, that is like the best kind of light that you can possibly receive, and we should all be getting this on a daily basis. We need to be observing the sunrise. This is going to start to spin the Krebs cycle. This is going to upregulate our mitochondrial function. This is going to set our neurochemistry in proper motion, right? This is literally like the spark that gives us life. We need to be getting that every single day. I'll also tell people you also need to be outside midday when you have those longer wavelengths of light. This you need to have exposure to your belly, in my opinion, so the microbiome can have a positive impact here. You also need to be outside as the sun is setting, right? This is another signal to the brain saying, hey, getting ready for bed, let's start to upregulate melatonin, let's start to calm the systems down, etc. Right? So those are three very key times that we need to be experiencing sunlight, and not just for the red and those types of wavelengths, sorry, but also for the UVA and UVB components, right? So we have a substance inside of our brain, inside of our nervous system called POMC. And when POMC has exposure to UV light, this actually is what produces melanin. And melanin is exceedingly important for neurological function, right? Most people think of melanin as like getting a tan. But we actually have melanin buried inside of our brain. Most people know about neuromelanin, right? This is the black substance in the substantia nigra, which helps us with dopamine production and et cetera. But we have melanin scattered throughout our entire nervous system. This is important in today's day and age because that melanin is actually protecting our brain from non-native EMFs. Okay, so opposite of that, and I know I'm going on a tangent, but if we're isolating ourselves from the sunlight, right, we're not getting sun exposure, and then we're only or primarily getting this non-native EMF, whether it be from a screen or from fluorescent lighting or something like that, that degrades our melanin sheets. And when the melanin starts to degrade, it actually turns into dopamine, right? And so we're actually creating this addiction cycle, and we're depleting our melanin stores. We're becoming more sensitive to non-native EMF, and now we're losing conduction velocity and coherence in our nervous system, and we're starting to see things like ADHD, neurobehavioral disorders, autism, chronic disorders of all types. This absolutely drives diabetes. There's multiple studies connecting it to that, all types of metabolic disorders and dysfunction. And what's going on? We're just not living how we were designed. We're designed to be outside in the sun. We're not designed to be in front of a screen inside, period, in the story.
Yeah, fantastic. And I'm pretty sure you're going to be recommending that to your patients while you're treating them and putting them through protocols. But obviously, these neurological patients just going into the sun is not, it's helping, but it's not treating them specifically with the power and the frequency you need. Or someone comes in with burnout or anxiety or depression, or they're really struggling with memory. The light that you've got is at another level with regards to where you're placing it. So obviously, it's not either or. The sunlight is important, but you're taking it to another level by the application. Am I right?
Correct. Yeah, it's basically how do we accelerate this process, right? That's the idea.
So just give us a quick rundown. Someone's got sort of maybe anxiety, really struggling to focus, a bit of brain fog, the traditional functional medicine of maybe adrenal fatigue, DHEA cortisol ratio is not good. We look at the heart rate variability. That's not great. They go on holiday. It improves by like 40, 50%. They come back into their work environment. How would you apply the laser protocol?
So I initially want to start to downregulate the inflammatory process that is going on in the brain and in the gut, because it was going on in the brain, it's going on in the gut as well. And that literally is kind of the protocol that I was describing earlier
Mm.
that I do for myself. So I'll do the blood
Okay.
illumination for the brain, blood illumination for the gut. Now, if someone has that chronic stress, right, anxiety and whatnot, then I need to upregulate my frontal lobe, right? So, or my prefrontal cortex, right? And so I can use a sensory motor rhythm. So now I'm talking about specific, brainwave oscillations. I can use sensory motor over my prefrontal cortex, and I can use my alpha brainwave over the posterior aspect of my brain. I specifically use GV20 acupuncture point, has been a brilliant way to influence brainwaves. And honestly, sometimes even if I need to influence the frontal lobe, I can still use GV20, and I see that brainwave actually be induced in the frontal lobe. It's been very impressive. So those are the main strategies there. Now, if we have a specific disease process going on or an autoimmunity, I have an immune protocol, right, where we hit the thymus, the liver, the spleen, and the gut. That's been actually very effective for immune challenges. So we can fold that in. So there's multiple things. Kidney 1 acupuncture point on the bottom of the foot.
Mm.
Love lasering that. It responds well. There's a research study that shows 10 hertz actually activating the vagus nerve by using 10 hertz photonic pulsing on kidney 1 acupuncture point. And so we have protocols that involve that. So again, it just depends on how granular do we want to be with that. But in general health for that stressed out
Mm.
individual with that kind of stuff, blood illumination brain, blood illumination gut, and that's going to set the stage for improved health across the board.
Brilliant. Now, I know you're growing in Dubai. We're going to talk about that. But what are the odds of Optimus carrying your laser in 5 years' time and doing the treatments within a clinical setting?
I'm sorry, what's the question?
What are the odds of Optimus robot that Elon Musk is developing carrying your laser, the 528i or the upgrade, doing treatments in places like Dubai?
Yeah. Okay. I have to be careful how I speak here because I have NDAs in place.
Sure, sure.
So I'll just say this: the odds are high.
Okay. Good to hear. Tell us a bit about your sort of international growth and what you're doing. I know we came to the end of the show, and obviously here in South Africa, we're looking to partner because I think the technology is there. But more than that, the character. And for me, I'm wanting to always partner with people of character who really have the end goal in mind in terms of transforming people's lives. So just tell us where you're at strategy-wise and implementation-wise.
Absolutely. So I've been working on opening a clinic in the UAE for, gosh, about 7 years now. So I initially went over there. I was consulting for neurobehavioral disorders largely, did some pilot studies, and the demand was huge. I mean, I'm talking, I started in Amman, Jordan, and I saw some kids, one day, and it was a busy day, got some good results. The next morning I was driving in, there was a line several
Wow.
blocks down the road. And I was like, what in the world? So it's just the demand is huge. The openness, right, to the more innovative type of therapies is huge. I've already, been in with the Ministry of Health multiple times. They love what we're doing. They, of course, want to see more, right? So they want more data. So that's why we've opened the private clinic there. And so now we are open there and we're seeing patients. And honestly, we're already having to expand. So I was just doing a board meeting with the partners. We're adding, two new PTs. We're adding more oversight. We're already to the phase of having to expand, which is awesome. That's faster than expected. But that's why I love the region. I love the region because they're open to innovation and they really just want to do what's best for their population. Or that's been what I've experienced. And so it's a great place to really, bring that innovative type of approach. I mean, I'm trying to develop things here in the United States, but there's a lot of layers of bureaucracy. There's a lot of layers of regulation. Some of that can be argued as a good thing. Some of that can be argued as, maybe not so good. And so that's what I love about Dubai. That's what I love about the region. So yeah, where it goes, man, we have so many different possibilities right now. Almost every week, I have someone from that region reach out to me with, some kind of collaborative, potential and whatnot. And I just can't accept them all. And not everything's a good fit. But yeah, so far it's been quite amazing.
Brilliant. Well done to you. Just want to declare favor and blessing over you, your family, your calling, the works that God has prepared in advance for you to do. Obviously, doing them in faith because there's no guarantee here, just sharing what God has said to you. And so thank you so much for your time. And maybe we can have just a quick chat in terms of what your Africa growth opportunities are. But thank you so much, Dr. Brandon Crawford. Just tell people where you can be reached. Please go to his Instagram page. It's incredible. I mean, I've just got the motor reflex. That's goose flesh happening because I've just watched so many stories, so many testimonials. This is the real deal. Someone who's really authentic and is excellent. And just the person that I've met here is integrous and honest and really wants to see change in the world. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate those kind words.